face. Sorry about that, lady.
Lorenzo, you know, that's like asking if they pregnant.
Hey, Clem.
Yep, that's Clem.
That's my NAACP Youth Council Director.
Yeah, Lord, she broke your in right, didn't she?
Yes.
All right, guys, we're going to get started. We are Facebook Live. We thank God for technology. So I'm just going to give a little backstory, and then I'm going to ask Camilla and Keidron to share their stories. But what we're here for is because probably over the last year, I have had conversations off and on with people who were needing information around restoring their voting rights or issues around past convictions, all of those kinds of things. And we were trying to find the resource. And so on Facebook, Keidron acknowledged that his voting rights had been restored. He was about to vote for the first time since then in this coming election. And I reached out to him and he said, yeah, that needs to be a conversation. And I said, would you be willing? And he said, yes. And he gave Camilla's name and thus is how we're here. I know both of them from different ways. So anybody who knows Attorney Turner knows her family and that she comes from a legacy of folks who don't mind getting into good trouble. So we thank God for her. I know her also because she was one of my youth volunteers at the National Civil Rights Museum when they were all babies. When I looked up and you said you had been in law for 20 years, I was like, she lying. That girl ain't been there that long. But she was one of those, and not one of those kids that started out doing their work at the Civil Rights Museum, not one of them am I anything less than ridiculously proud of. They're activists, they're engaged in their communities, they're entrepreneurs, they're doing wonderful things. So I'm grateful that she's here. Her uncle Agape told me to tell her to behave. And I said to him, y'all have not given her any kind of firm example to do that. And so I don't expect her to start behaving on my conversation.
Right.
And then Keidron, now this man, I don't know if he embarrasses easily. So I have known of him throughout his work, throughout the city, him being engaged and not afraid to take on power, our reservation, right? But I saw him first, and so I know him by way of the relationships that he has. My friend Elaine Blanchett, they were a part of those who were surveyed. That's not the word. The government, the city did surveillance on them because they were protesting and standing on the side of right. And he is unwavering. He'll go in a room and tell folks who got money that he don't care who they are, that they're gonna make room at the table for all of us. But he was at a protest. He was at what you do when you go before the media, at a press conference with Earl Fisher at the Paradise. And I walked up to Keidron and I said, excuse me, I mean no disrespect, but you are one of the most good looking child I've ever seen in my life. And I just need you to know that God has blessed you and we're grateful for you. Did I not say that? I said, I don't mean no, I ain't gonna do nothing wrong. I just need you to know you are one good looking Black man. And I'm partial to good looking Black men who are entrepreneurs, who fight for their families, and who are strong examples. So that's who you are to me, Keidron. And so I thank you for what you do. I thank both of you. And to know that you all have partnered with each other and are now going to share the journey with us today is indeed a blessing. So we don't count it robbery that you're giving us this time. What I asked them to do is to introduce themselves, and they have a loose outline and we'll take it from there. Go ahead, guys.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Pastor Nichols, for having me. And we actually met before the Civil Rights Museum when I was attending South Park Girls Club. Yes, when I was a little itty bitty girl.
Baby.
You worked at the South Park Girls Club. So we go even further back. Way back. Yes, absolutely. But again, thank you. I think this is a necessary conversation. My name is Camilla Turner. I'm a lawyer. I practice here in Memphis. I practice criminal defense. I represent children and adults charged with criminal acts. And that's everything from petty theft to first-degree murder. I started helping people get their voting rights restored a couple of years ago because I realized that most people who are convicted of a felony in Tennessee never seek to get their rights restored when they are able. And so I took it upon myself. I've worked with a lot of different organizations, a lot of different people to try to help people get their voting rights restored and to help them get other citizenship rights restored as well. I was connected with Keidron Franklin actually through Facebook because he commented that he was a convicted felon and that he could not vote. And I let him know, I said, oh, yes, you can vote and I can help you. And so I was able to walk him through the process. He got his rights restored and he did vote in this election. So I want to spread the word to let to let other people know that this is not the end of your citizenship when you are convicted of a felony. So thank you again for having me, and I'll pass it to Keidron.
Yes. Thank you a lot, Camilla. And I honor you, Dr. Roz. I really appreciate you for having us on and doing this because it's needed. I had tons of inboxes and messages and calls about, hey, people that I didn't even know was felons. Like, I like my rights restored, and people I didn't know that even wanted to take place in the process. Just like most so-called Black people or males in Memphis, I was drawn to a lifestyle that endured me a way of moving however I wanted to. And just because, again, when I come into organizing professionally, there was things that the city, they surveilled me about because I could make my own money, or because I was making my own money. A lot of people didn't know that I was involved in the weed industry at the time. And so, yeah, I can move. And so when I come to the table and tell the folks with the money, I don't care about your money because I got my own. That scared them into wanting to figure out, okay, what's going on? And so I caught a charge in 2018 that led to a felony conviction in 2019. And so in the summer of 2019, there was an organization that tried to help, and then they was like, well, we can't help you. And so when it come up, when Attorney Turner said that, hey, shoot, I can help, I was like, okay, well, I'll still try this process again. And this time it was successful. And I was like, okay, cool. That's one that I didn't even realize you can get your rights restored so quickly. I thought there was a waiting period, and I have a Class E felony. So I'm thinking there's at least a 5-year wait period before I can even try to, attain my restoration rights to vote. And so there was also a proof that no, that's not true. That's just, I guess, because I didn't really go and research myself. I just somehow assumed. A lot of times that's how I perpetuated my own lack of not knowing something is not really researching or having the resources of people that can say that's willing to do the work that Attorney Turner is doing and has been doing. So I'm fortunate enough to have the resources around. I've organized myself out of those spaces. And so for me, I can't hold this information. She can't do all the work. So we need more people who's willing and more attorneys who's willing. I pass it over to you.
Yes. And I feel like I need to say something about the history of the voter suppression, especially since I see my former youth council, NAACP youth council director on here. I must say that this is voting rights historically has been something that's been under attack. And this is another form of voter suppression. So 1 in 5 Black people in Tennessee, that's 20% of Black people in the state of Tennessee, cannot vote due to a felony conviction. And if that's not voter suppression, I don't know what is. And when I talk about the law, I'm going to be talking about Tennessee law today. So you lose the right to vote when you are convicted of a felony. And a felony is anything that carries more than 11 months and 29 days in jail. Anything 11 months and 29 days or less is a misdemeanor. If it's 1 year or more, it's a felony. And that doesn't You don't have to actually serve that time. It could be 1 year probation. It could be, community corrections, anything, but 1 year or more is a felony. And once you have a felony conviction, you lose your right to vote in Tennessee. You lose your right to serve on a jury. You lose your right to own a firearm. You lose your right to be an executor of an estate. Certain drug convictions, you lose the ability to apply for public housing and other federal government benefits like federal student loans. A lot of employers will not hire people who have felony convictions, or they'll make you wait 7, 10, however many years. So there are a lot of what we call collateral consequences to having a felony conviction. And losing your right to vote is one of them. Your right to serve on a jury is another. Like I said, there's so many, but I know we want to focus on your voting rights. You can get your voting rights restored after you finish your probation, after you've completed, served your sentence. There's no waiting period after that. After you've completed your sentence, you can have your voting rights restored in Tennessee. However, there are challenges. If you are arrears in arrears in your child support, meaning you are not current in your child support, you cannot vote after a felony conviction. And this voter suppression that we're talking about, there's really no logical correlation, in my opinion, between owing child support and being able to vote. But somebody in our state legislature thought that this needed to be another barrier to preventing people from voting. So if you have been incarcerated or even gone through the process of having to go to court and having a criminal charge pending, it is likely that you will miss some child support payments and be lacking. Certainly if you're incarcerated, you can't pay your child support because you, of course, can't work. And so anyway, if you're in arrears in your child support, you cannot vote. If you were convicted of certain offenses, murder, a sexual offense, there are treason, bribery. So there's a short list of offenses that if you were convicted of these offenses, you cannot vote. The law has changed over the years, but in general, you can vote unless you were convicted of murder, rape, treason, bribery, voter fraud, okay? And you can have your rights restored unless you owe child support. And where Keidron, his challenge was, like most people, is that he owed court costs. So court costs are assessed to anybody who has a court case. And they can be anywhere from a couple of $100 to $30,000 or more, depending on whether you were incarcerated. So that's where most people find the challenge, because they can't afford to pay their court costs, so they can't have their voting rights restored. However, there is a provision that says if you have a hearing and a judge determines that you are indigent at the time of application, meaning you don't have the money to pay the court costs at the time, the judge can declare you indigent and you can register to vote at that point. So that's what I have been working with people to do. That was what, like I said, Keidron's issue was he owed court costs. And I believe it was what, 2003, I'm not sure the amount.
About $3,000.
About 3,000, yes. And so he wasn't able to pay the court costs at one time to pay it all off, but he wanted to vote. So we had a hearing before the judge, and I will say that the judge in this particular case was not opposed to people having their rights restored. So it really was not much of a hearing. It was answering a couple of questions about, can you pay $3,000 today? Okay, well, I'll declare you indigent so that you can register to vote. So he was able to then take that form that they give you in the clerk's office, take that form to the election commission, and then they sent it to Nashville. Nashville approved it because Nashville has to make sure, remember, that he doesn't, owe child support or anything like that, or that he doesn't have convictions in other states. After Nashville approves it, the Tennessee Election Commission will let the person know your voting rights have been restored. You'll get a voter registration card in the mail and you can vote. The challenge is, like I said, most people don't even know that they can get their voting rights restored. And then once they realize that they can, and they realize that they owe court costs, they give up, because if they see that they owe $10,000 in court costs, they know they can't afford to pay that. So they just decide not to attempt to get their rights restored. That's why it's important that the lawyers, that we let people know that we will help you to have a hearing before a judge so that you can be declared indigent, and then you can apply to register to vote without having paid your court costs. So I know that was a lot.
Can I ask a question about that, Turner?
Yes.
So I know around mine there was kind of a rush because the election was coming up. Just say, people know they'll have to wait till next year. Is there a time period where you can use indigent, or at any time can someone just say, hey, I can't afford to pay this right now, but I want to restore my rights?
Yes, at any time. So a lot of people wanted to get their rights restored before this presidential election, because naturally we realized that it was a very important election, and it certainly was. But there are other local elections that affect us more than the presidential election. For example, we're going to be choosing a DA soon. We're going to be choosing judges, state legislators, people who are making decisions about this very thing that we're talking about. So this is an ongoing thing. It's not, get your rights restored for the presidential election. It's get your rights restored as soon as you can, because all the elections are important.
So I'm looking at the chat. I'm looking at the chat, guys, and I think you may have hit on this part of Patty's question, Clem's daughter. Part of Patty's question. Patty works, her nonprofit is Make a Difference, and she works with this population, she says, and was wondering two questions. If someone is in arrears in fees or restitution, how does that apply? I think you've addressed that question.
Yes, they cannot vote unless they are current with child support. And the restitution, if restitution was ordered, then restitution must be paid. That's not something that an indigency declaration will cure. If there's a restitution, the restitution has to be paid before the person can vote, and they must not be in arrears in child support.
Those are two that are outside of the judge.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then the second part of her question has to do with pro bono lawyers who work on this work, or what's required, I guess, financially to even start this process? Are there those lawyers that do this pro bono, and what is it financially needed?
Well, I do them all pro bono. I don't charge anything. Now, the clerk's office was charging a $100 filing fee to go before the judge to be declared indigent, but I was able to speak with the people at the clerk's office, and they agreed to allow people to file without paying the $100 filing fee up front. That fee may be included in the overall cost later, depending on what the judge determines, but they don't have to pay anything.
Okay.
The client is not required to pay anything to get their voting rights restored.
And is that Heidi Kuhn's office?
That's Heidi Kuhn's office, yes.
Yes.
And
Okay.
I think CAO is Cedric Wooten, and so I was able to work with him and talk to him, and they agreed to allow people to go before the judge without paying that $100 up front.
Yeah, I'm saying these names out loud because people need to know that you vote for Heidi Kuhn. You vote for these people who will either stand in your way or create another roadblock to you getting. So it's good to know who the people are who you're able to talk to. So Patty, yes, Camila, Attorney Turner does his work pro bono, and the $100 is not something that's needed right now as a result of the. So what is the criteria that judges use to deny or restore voting rights? And can a judge decide, this is Barbara Andrews, because a person has a job or a car or home, that they are not indigent?
Yes, a judge can determine that a person is not indigent. I have not had that happen because the statute is very particular. It's indigent at the time of application. So it doesn't matter, in my opinion, it's on this day, am I able to pay this full amount? To me, that's the question. And that's what I argue before the court. This person doesn't have $3,000 today to pay this. There is only one judge that I know of in Shelby County that what's the word, that is not
not helpful.
That is not helpful to people who would like to have their
Facebook Live. If we weren't on Facebook Live, we might use other words.
Right.
Do we want to name that person, or it's not in our best interest to do so?
No, I won't name that judge, but I'm sure if people are familiar with the courts, if they could guess right on the first try. Yes, so I want to talk about some other rights that you can have replenished as well. So your right to vote, that's something that you can do without having your full citizenship rights restored. That's something that you can do if you don't owe court costs, you can do it out of court. Now, if you want to have your full citizenship rights restored, and that means the right to serve on a jury, the right to be an executor of an estate, possibly the right to carry a firearm, the right to, what are some other rights? There's so many, unfortunately, rights that you lose that you, like I said, can have restored, but you have to go through circuit court to have these other rights restored. And I want to talk about gun rights in particular. It's very difficult to get your gun rights restored, even if you do get your full citizenship rights restored, because there are a lot of federal laws that govern guns. And most people, especially if it's a drug offense, if it's a domestic violence offense, even a misdemeanor domestic violence offense, you lose your right to carry a firearm or own a firearm. So that's a right. Once you lose it, you will probably never get it back. And that's something that people ought to think about before you plead guilty to a felony, because, you know, in Tennessee, we're a southern state, everybody wants to have a gun, you know, and so you lose your right to have a gun if you have a felony conviction. And even if you get other rights back, you still probably won't get that right back. But you can go through another process through circuit court to get other rights back, like your right to serve on a jury, your right to be an executor of an estate, and such. So people need to be aware of that as well if they want to get their other rights restored. That's more of a, it's a lot more complex than just getting your voting rights restored.
Okay. Keidron, you were gonna say something?
Now, and that's something I wanted to ping Attorney Turner on, just, I guess we can talk about offline, because I know of someone who caught a felony and had their gun rights restored, and it was a whole nother different process they went through. Just like what you're saying, the circuit court was a little higher, and so that's something I want to just talk to you about, to see about. And I know it's like I said, not to take up much time, but just wanted to ping you on it.
No, I think it's fine to have a conversation, because there are a number of folks that I know who either they train their spouse or they equip somebody else in the family because they themselves cannot carry that firearm. They can't. I also think that there's a second part of that when Attorney Turner talks about what I think Michelle Alexander points out, that when we accept whatever is offered to us, we're not always aware when we're standing before a judge or we're looking at those sentences, that when we take whatever is offered to us, we don't realize the ripple effect of what it's going to do down the line on our lives. Am I fair to make that connection?
Yes, absolutely. And I want to say something about guns. When somebody is a convicted felon, you can't just say, oh, that's my boyfriend's gun or my girlfriend's gun or my child's gun. If you are in the vicinity of a gun or even bullets, you are breaking the law, because possession is not just always literal, but what we call constructive. So if you're in the house and the gun is upstairs and you're a convicted felon, that's your gun. So people need to really be aware of that. And somebody asked a question about plea deals, and I really want to answer that, and I wanted to talk about that anyway. So a lot of times people, especially when people are in jail, they will take a deal that's not a good deal to get out of jail. Most cases end with a plea agreement. Most cases do not go to trial. I believe it's something like 98% of cases are settled with a guilty plea. I think it's 98% in federal court and 96% in state court. So what this means is most people are taking deals. And before you take a deal, you really need to be aware of your options and aware of the consequences. So how do you not have a felony conviction? You can try to get the case, the deal broken down to a misdemeanor. You can go to trial. And a lot of people are afraid to go to trial because they think that it won't be a fair trial because they don't trust the system. And there are reasons to not trust the system. That's a legitimate concern. But people really need to start going to trial more, if you ask me, because most people who go to trial are not convicted as charged. It's a lot more difficult than people think it is to convince 12 people to agree to convict as charged on most offenses. But like I said, a lot of people are afraid to go to trial, or if you're in jail, say, I've had people who've been in jail maybe a year and there's literally almost no evidence against them. And before the trial, the prosecutor will come and say, if your client will agree to 1 year probation, they'll get out of jail today. 1 year probation on a felony, whatever, get out of jail today, or stay in jail until their trial date at least, and potentially face 20 years in prison. Anybody would take that deal. An innocent person would take that deal. And it's something that I've been talking about, that the American Bar Association has been talking about, all the lawyers. We know that this is a tactic that is being used to get people to plead guilty. And we also have to talk about the bail system and the need for bail reform, because
preaching today,
people are in jail just because they can't afford to post their bond, and the bond may be, $100,000, $50,000, and you are in jail because you're poor. I've had people out of custody on $1 million bail before, $1 million, and then I've had people in jail with a $200 bail. So how is that fair? You're in jail because you can't afford $200, and another person who's charged with murder and has $1 million bond is walking around is free. Yeah, that's not fair. And I think that I'm glad that there's a national conversation about bail reform, because there's definitely a need for that. And I think that if less people were in jail, they would be less likely to take some of these deals that are not good deals.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're desperate when you've been in jail and away from your family, your friends, your job, your community. You're probably, you know, physically ill from the food that you're eating. You know, you're mentally drained and spiritually drained, and you're ready to go. So if somebody comes to you and says, you can go home today, if you plead guilty to this felony, you will go home, you will see your mother and your children and your wife and your husband, you'll see them today.
Yeah.
Okay. Or you can take your chances with this system that you already know is broken.
Right.
You already know it's unfair. You want to take your chances with this system, with a judge you don't trust, with detectives and police officers who may lie on the stand, with witnesses who may lie on you. You want to chance it, or you want to go home.
Right.
So anybody with good sense is usually going to say, you know what, let me just sign for it. I'll deal with whatever I have to deal with on the outside, but at least I'll be out, you know, on the outside. That's something that
I think we are more aware because of Michelle Alexander's work and because of the Central Park documentary, all of those. We see the impact of people making pleas and the ripple effect that you resolve an issue in the immediate moment, but you don't realize the devastating ripple effect, and it's understandable. So I also think that and I'm not saying that you do, but I think that as we continue to educate and inform our folks, that we don't vilify when people have made those decisions in the past out of those desperate circumstances, you know, because the ripple effect is that not only does society label our folks, but then we label folks as well. Like, well, why did you do it? And why did you? And we're not standing in those places. And what we really need to do is address the system and not the individuals impacted by the system. That's what I would like to ask this one question. Patty, I'm gonna get to Patty's question. I would like to ask this question. You talk about if Keaton didn't have the $3,000 he needed and he could go to the courts and be identified so he wouldn't have to, are there places and what are those resources that are in place in our city today that either help with bail or help with addressing those fees so that people can get closer to restoration? What are those resources in our community?
Yeah, so there's an organization called Just City, J-U-S-T, City, C-I-T-Y, and their mission is to help people with bail, with fees that are owed for expungements and things like that. And that's another thing that we haven't spoken about that I want to mention, expungements. There is a limited amount of felony offenses that you can get expunged or erased from your record. And it's either a misdemeanor or a very low class felony. And if you have one, or in certain circumstances, two, you can get one expunged from your record. Most people don't qualify because the list is so short of the offenses that you can get expunged. If you know,
that does not have anything to do with those are two separate tracks of restoration. Expungement is one track, voter restoration is a separate track.
That's completely separate.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most of the time, if you plead guilty to a felony, it will be on your record forever, most of the time. Now, we have a program in Tennessee called diversion, and diversion is where you essentially plead guilty to something and you're not sentenced. They'll hold it and you'll be on a type of special probation for a length of time. And if you successfully complete the diversion, then the conviction does not go on your record. It's essentially erased at that point. So if you go on diversion, you're not a convicted felon. The only thing is you can only use diversion once in your lifetime. And so a lot of times people will use their diversion on something, you know, rather small when they're 18, and then they'll have something else to happen when they're 25 or 30 and the diversion is not available. So I always tell people, hold on to your diversion as long as you can. You know, don't use it unless you really have to, because you can only use it one time. So you successfully complete the diversion, you can have it erased from your record. And like I said,
I used my diversion up the first time.
Okay, so you had already used your diversion.
Yes, and so that's something I wanted to speak to, was because I did plead out for a felony weed charge for something else to go away. And so, you know, and there are these different scenarios where for me, I thought through the process, my wife was pregnant at the time. So I'm like, you know, this other thing would send me straight to the feds. I'm not trying to be a school teacher. I'm kind of set in my life on what I'm gonna be. You know, I take this and live with whatever comes behind it, because I had already had 2 previous weed charges. One in 2015 where they tried to put someone else's gun on me, which I got that expunged because somehow it was on my record. I believe I told you about that, Attorney Turner. And then my first weed charge in 2005, you know, like almost a year after I graduated high school. I said that's something that's been my life. And that's kind of what the poorest city offer you sometimes when jobs won't hire you, is whatever the streets can give you. So yeah, I used my diversion up the first time, and so the second time, you know, I just again went through the ropes, and then the third time, you know, it was going to be a felony anyway, but I also had some mushrooms. So you know, the amount of mushrooms I had would send me directly to the feds. So yeah, my thing was to avoid that while my wife was pregnant, and you know, and so
that's right.
I did plead out, and again, that's something I live with. But I agree, everyone should take it to trial. You know, even though I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't say everyone.
Not everyone, but almost everyone.
Can I ask this question? How much of this is connected or related to drug charges around marijuana and that? Like, how much of what you're dealing with is related to how we in this state of Tennessee address marijuana use?
Yes, so of course marijuana is still illegal in Tennessee.
Still illegal in state of Tennessee.
Yes, possession, selling, all of it. Yes, everything, edibles, you know, and I know that people are doing it, but you know, it's still illegal, so they're still charging people with it, and people are still going to jail for it.
Right.
And people are a lot more lax about it now because it is legal in other places, but it's not legal here. And, you know, I talked about diversion before. A lot of times I've had people to violate their diversion because they're failing drug tests, because they're smoking marijuana. You know, a lot of people smoke marijuana, and when you're on probation or diversion or something like that, that can be a violation. You know, you can get sent back to jail or, you know, sentenced because of that. So that's just something that we need to be aware of. I don't know where we are as far as legislation is concerned in this state. I feel like we will probably be one of the last states to legalize it. It will happen eventually, but I don't think it'll be anytime soon. And it's still against the law, and people are still going to jail for marijuana.
And are those people that are still going to jail mostly Black and brown people?
Of course.
Yeah. And it comes down to the amount of money they have to spend on the capacity of, you know, turning over a lot of these cases, doing the paperwork, versus, oh, it's easy for us to just keep locking Negroes up. And so it just comes, you know, we have to challenge them where they're not being challenged at about some simple stuff. If I go across the bridge, I can become an herbalist. I can be looked at as a holistic guy. But you know, I can walk across the bridge and become a felon or a criminal, which, you know, again, it's asinine for people that look like me. Sure.
Yeah, and so we have to do what both of you are saying is that we have to address the inconsistency and yet also realize what state we're in right now, so that we don't also get caught up when we can. I'm not trying to wipe away how folks got to take care of themselves, right? You got a wife and baby to feed, you got to do what you got to do. But we also have to be aware that it's a setup in some instances for another justification to lock Black and brown bodies up. Barbara Andrews says, it seems unfair the services or options such as expungement cost. It seems unfair what that cost. And why does one have to pay for this? Barbara, you may want to take yourself off of mute in case I'm not articulating your question. And then I'll ask your question, Tracy.
Yes, so the expungement fee up until about a year and a half ago was $400. It's $100 now, thanks to some of our state legislators, namely Ramesh Akbari and Karen Camper. So I want to definitely call their names because of the work that they have done to help make it easier for people to get convictions expunged from their record. So yes, now there is a $100 fee that must be paid in order to get something expunged. And I want to take a liberty and speak to something because it's very important. It's not necessarily the topic of this discussion, but I want to talk about false confessions and police speaking to, namely, children without a parent or a lawyer present. The Memphis police will question a child regarding a serious felony offense without a parent or a lawyer present. And this is something that I have been working to try to change. I think we need a law that makes it mandatory that a lawyer be present when the police speak to children regarding a felony offense or really any offense. So far, California is the only state that has this law, and they just passed it in September. So, you know, I have had, I know of many cases where children have made false confessions to homicides in this city. And I always, anytime I speak to parents, I want to let them know to tell your children that if they are questioned by the police, to say, I want a lawyer, because the police will have to stop talking to them at that point. Do not tell them to ask for you, because what's going to happen is they're going to ask for you, and by the time you get there, they will have already confessed to something. So teach your children to say, I want a lawyer, and you should know this yourself. Say, I want a lawyer, and that way the questioning must stop right then and there. But I represented a child last year in Memphis who confessed to a homicide. He was 17 years old. He didn't have a parent or a lawyer present. And he had been in jail almost a year before I was able to convince the prosecutors to release him. So I don't want this to happen to any other children, any other people. So I always take an opportunity to let people know that you have to say, I want a lawyer. So that the police will stop the questioning.
Another part. Go ahead.
I wanted to echo sentiments that I also know of another situation of a child, and I'm gonna plug this because I was working with field training at the time of his demise, and they blamed these young children. And we also had a participatory defense program set up, and so I know of children making false claims and talking directly to the DA, you know, and so this is not only with police department, this is with the prosecutorial, you know, administration also. And so they learn it from the ones that's gonna protect them when they violate. So yeah, I do want to raise that this happens, and it's a big issue. I know of adults who have admitted to murder because the police give them a paper, say you're gonna be here for the rest of your life unless you sign this, and they sign it away. And so yeah, this is a norm, and it's not isolated at all.
I want to commend, I know that Lloyd and his chapter of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, did I say that correctly, Rem Lloyd? that they just had a session with their lamplighters to begin to equip and prepare our boys, and that Freedom's Chapel is looking to do the same thing, that the men have spoken about either creating videos or something that just kind of locks us in. We don't know until we're sitting in those places, and we don't go prepared to walk into those spaces. But I think that the more we do this kind of work, just to educate and inform, we don't want to end up sitting in the room with the police. Nobody's waking up to do that, but we do need to be just like that 10 and 2. We do need to be prepared, because preparation helps save our lives, right? It helps save our lives. Turner, can you talk a little bit about the difference? You've spoken specifically to the state of Tennessee. We have some folks who their charges are outside of the state of Tennessee. Are some of what you said similar or only unique to Tennessee? What do folks whose charges are outside of Tennessee do to get their voting rights restored in particular? Or expungement?
Yes. So if you're trying to vote in the state of Tennessee and you have convictions outside of the state of Tennessee, there is a certificate of restoration that has to be filled out by a court clerk or a probation personnel officer. So you would have to coordinate with the clerk's office where you were convicted in Tennessee, so that they can get that certificate from whatever other state you have the conviction in. Now, as far as the law is concerned about voting restoration, every state is different. So there are 2 states where you don't lose your right to vote when you are convicted of a felony, and that is Maine and I believe Vermont or something like that. Some states, your voting rights are automatically restored after you finish serving your sentence. So it just depends on what state you're in. But if you're trying to vote in Tennessee and you have convictions in other states as well, you would have to get a certificate of restoration regarding those other convictions before you can vote in Tennessee.
You need an attorney to do that, or is that something that a person can work out on their own?
Well, you don't need an attorney unless you owe court costs and you have to go before a judge to address the court costs issue. That's the major challenge for anybody, is the court costs.
Dealing with the court costs. Do most other areas also have something like indigent that they can apply for in other areas, or is that unique to Tennessee?
I don't really want to speak to other states. Like I said, it's different in each state. I'm only licensed in Tennessee, but every state has a different way to get voting rights restored. And like I said, 2 states, you don't lose your right at all. And then some states, you can vote even while you're in jail or prison. And, it just depends. But for Tennessee, so
it's helpful for people to follow through on figuring out what that state requires.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, very good. Do we have any other questions?
I think there was something in the chat from Megan.
Yeah, Megan has listed the issues that Micah is working toward, asking the state legislature and those processes. We're really involved. Freedom's Chapel is very much a partner with Micah, and so we're working on these processes. This is specific to helping the folks that I know personally, and that I believe now that we're on Facebook Live, who, like me, when Attorney Turner and I had the conversation, I thought that you had to get things expunged before you could get voting rights restored. And when she clarified that, that was an aha moment, that those are 2 separate issues, and that the list for expungement is a shorter list, because I know of folks who didn't meet that criteria. And so I just assumed because they couldn't get that done, they couldn't get voting rights. So I want to be sure that people are clear that if you have a felony conviction, that does not mean you cannot get your voting rights restored. And if you're in Facebook now and you somewhere in the state of Georgia, I'm gonna need you to try to get yours restored right now so that you can vote on January the 5th. But that's just a plug outside of Tennessee. But I do want everybody to know that that there is a path to that portion of your restoration. I also want folks to know that at Freedom's Chapel, this gives us something to work around in support with folks. That now that we are more informed, we can stand with folks to find out what are those fees, what are those hindrances, what is it that we can work toward, because we say we want to help restore people, but if you don't do the work, you can't do it. Does anybody else have any other questions? Go ahead, both of you.
And I just wanted to say, you can, if people want to get their voting rights restored, they can reach out to the Memphis branch NAACP, and they will connect them with lawyers and other, volunteers who will assist them. Now, the first step, what people can do is they can go to the clerk's office of the court of conviction. So if you have a federal conviction, you can go to the federal probation office, and I think they are 100% virtual now. So you may have to call the federal probation office, or you can go, if it was a state conviction out of Shelby County, you can go to the criminal court clerk's office on the 3rd floor. And that way you will find out what you need to do, how much money you owe. So that would be the first step. And then if you need assistance from a lawyer to ask for indigency from a court, then you can call the Memphis branch NAACP. And let me get, do you know the number right off?
No, but I don't know the number right off.
Okay.
Tracy will find it very quickly. So we need, and Rev. Lord, you wrote down those two, that step 1. Yes, you wrote down step 1. And then the step 2 is regarding indigency. I don't even know if that's the right word, but addressing the issue of indigency. And that is where you need an attorney, and that's NAACP. And sometimes we do not recognize and give credit to the role that the NAACP still plays in our world today. We just want to put that out there. A lot of us have kind of poo-pooed. You and I grew up that the NAACP was the power broker in our communities. And we've sometimes diminished that role that psychologically we've diminished that role. So thank you for saying that they still are the power broker for us.
Absolutely. And I also have to call the name of Maxine Smith, who is the woman that is the reason that I am doing what I'm doing now. She trained up my parents in the struggle, in the movement, and they trained me, and she trained me as well. Now her sister was who's on this call, was my NAACP Youth Council director. And so it's all full circle. We're still in this. We had a lot of protests over the summer due to some specific things that were happening in our community, but these things are not new. We've been dealing with these things since we came to this country, really. And so we just have to remember that the struggle continues. I see Barbara Andrews, who from the National Civil Rights Museum, when I was volunteering there, but we know that it's a continuum. It's a struggle that is not over. So that's why when I say we're going to keep on helping people get their rights restored, because it's not about one election. No, it's about all the elections to come. So
you're very committed. I know Freedom's Chapel and our partnership. Let me give you another shout out to the NAACP, and Tracy has put the contact information, phone number in the chat. But in this recent election, we were committed to providing safe transportation to the polls. But we, Freedom's Chapel, we don't have a van. However, we don't have to have a van to be powerful in our partnerships. And our partnership with the NAACP and the Voters Alliance through MICA allowed us to be able to provide access to that transportation. I'm only doing that to help us to understand that there are more resources than we realize, and that what we do in these conversations is to become educated about the paths to the liberation that we say we want. So that is vital, and that it is generational, right? That it is generational, and that we can't exclude or dismiss the new generation with the old generation, and we need both in order to get to where we're trying to go. And my last comment is that we're doing this. We want to get voting. So you got past presidential election. All right, you got that done. But you still need to not sleep on getting your voting rights restored, because in 2022, we will name a number of people, including a new district attorney. And we are intentional about addressing that position in the state of Tennessee, in the city of Memphis in particular. Can you say very briefly, I'm not asking you to speak about our current district attorney, but Attorney Turner, can you speak to what the role is of the district attorney in all of this that you've just talked about?
Yes, so the district attorney, first of all, determines who gets charged with what offense. They determine whether what the sentence, what type of deals will be presented to people. They determine, when it comes to restoring rights, the district attorney has an opportunity to be heard regarding whether a person should have their rights restored. Now, I have made the argument that when it comes to indigency, that the district attorney really has no standing in that matter, because it's a matter of fact for the judge to determine. But I have had prosecutors to challenge that, to challenge indigency. So it's a very, very important position. The judges, so when somebody is convicted, the judge is the one who sentences you. The judge is the one who determines whether you have violated your probation or diversion. The judge is the one who you deal with when you go to court every month or every other month. So it's important to know who you are selecting to be the judge, to be the district attorney, to be in juvenile court with your children and your families.
Yep.
In circuit court, when you're dealing with business matters and evictions. And so all of these things are important. So it's important to vote, and people will listen to you when they know that you are a voter and you have the power to influence other voters. Right. So that's one of the very harsh realities of having a felony conviction in this country, is that you almost no longer have a voice, because your voice is not seen as important.
Right.
So they know that you're not voting, and usually when people are not voting themselves, they are not mobilizing other voters. So elected officials are less likely to lend an ear. That's right. So that's why there is power in being a voter.
And I'm very proud to say that 100% of the eligible registered voters at Freedom's Chapel Christian Church voted this last time, that we are in the game. And the next step that we are doing is to be intentional about adding numbers to our game, so that the next go round, we have more of our folks. I do want to highlight the reason why us seeing and acknowledging Mr. Keaton Franklin is significant to me, because we have images around what we think felons look like, and we vilify them, and then it becomes a tool used as to justifying our system. And it's because we don't put a face on a father and an entrepreneur and an activist and a young man who acknowledges whatever he did, does not try to fix it, but is not the image of what has often been labeled as the worst of the people in our community that are walking around trying to get us. And so I am grateful that you are here, because I want people to see you. Name your food truck, your coffee truck.
Tell us about the check-in.
Tell us about yeah, please.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. The check-in is a social entrepreneurship, actually. Again, just realizing there's an issue, and I've just so happened to organize myself out of some of the poverty that I was born and raised in. Had created a social entrepreneurship that looks to hire felons and people that was locked out of the economics. Because again, this is the second poorest metropolitan city in the country. So People are a couple paychecks away from being on the streets or homeless or unhoused, hungry. So the idea, I have a brick and mortar building also, but the idea is to have felons and people locked out, put 10 of these trucks around the city, and also teach soft skills, because a lot of people don't have the skills to maintain a job, let alone, because, you know, this is the temp agency or logistical warehouse. So we don't pour into our, and I don't even call my employees, I call them community members. We don't pour into our community members like that. To where we want to see them go up and further themselves. So this is what this is, because I also teach literacy, you know, and so a lot of it is different soft skills along with literacy, and just real skills where you can learn and figure out other things that you want to do. So I'm posted at 1798 Winchester Road, Monday through Sunday. It's no fun day for me. I have to survive. Pay my employees $15 an hour, and that was one of the things that I guess they judged that because I had a business and I was paying my employees livable wage, but I take the brunt of it. You know, like my community members may make $15 an hour, you know, and they clear their checks, but I and the truck may take home very minimal, because that's something I truly believe in and know that once you pay a person something that they can meet their basic needs, you get a better production work out of, a better product out of it, and you help pour into the person who's pouring into your company. So on weekends, I'm actually training one of my friends' younger brother. He's 16 years old, you know, wanting to make his own money. And so training him about soft skills, come and learn the truck. And just make you some money while you're trying to learn how you, whenever you figure out what you want to do, how you can maintain a job. How do you show up? How do you even apply for a job? How do you sit down and interview? So these soft skills you get in real time while working at the check-in. Again, it's
come on, it's called a check-in, and it's located where?
1798 Winchester Road.
1798. And what can we get at the check-in? I see what you're doing.
You can get libations at the check-in from different specialty coffees, teas, lemonades, Monday through Wednesday. One of my partners, he's again a felon and looking to spark his own business, so he started a sandwich business, you know, and so I allow him to come and set up, you know, Monday through Wednesday, so he can start sparking his own entrepreneurship. So and there's a host of things we do, you know. We just had a drive-through haunted house in Trunk or Treat where we served over 300 children for free hot chocolate. We're actually going to do a haunted Thanksgiving where sipping paint, 50 children, the parents get hams and turkeys. And so it's more about community and building community. The coffee just, you know, the coffee's all right. It just brings people here. But the biggest thing I care about is building community overall.
And so you do, you teach us what it means to do good and well at the same time. Do good and well at the same time. Yeah, I think that is really vital, because these are powerful conversations that we need to have, because we oftentimes don't come together in these forums to even discuss it. And so I am grateful that you guys have taken your time today. This will not be the last conversation that we have. Mr. Franklin, we have a commercial kitchen in our church. We try and figure out how to do good and well at the same time with it. And so we need powerful minds like yours to show us an example.
Yes.
By example, for example. And Attorney Turner, you know, you just are continuing the legacy. I want to say it's 11:20, and I want to be. Oh, look at the truck. Go wait a minute. Look at the truck, somebody. All right. We are impressed. Yes, we are. Again, we love entrepreneurs at the Freedom Chapel Christian Church.
Yeah. So again, I own the brick and mortar. Someone tried to burn my building down in September. Yeah, you know, just small hurdles when you build a community. People try things.
We're not burning no building down. That just means your building is gonna get better. Your building is gonna get better. That's what we're gonna say.
Yes.
Yep, that's what we're gonna say.
Want to steal something out the building before they burn it down. You know, that's stuff other people do. But again, as community, because I've poured into community, they've helped me kind of get everything that was burned up back. I've already started the process of cleaning and gutting out my building. So by 2021, the coffee spot will be up. I have a second truck that'll be coming up, and I have a Midtown location that I'll be in. So all they can do is just watch a felon perform like they think they can.
Well, we come from a long legacy of folks who show folks what we can do when they say we can't. I mean, that's just in our DNA, son. That's who we are. That's how we roll.
Yes.
All right, so I want to thank everybody who's on here. Clementine, you want to wave at your baby? Wave at her. Take yourself off mute if you can. I don't even know. Patty need to come take you off mute. Wave at your baby. You raised her up. Look at her. She's an attorney. Look at her. 20 years in the game. Let me see if I can get her off mute.
Oh, I don't think she knows how to get off mute.
She probably doesn't. But Patty's somewhere. I'm surprised she's not in there giving us instructions. But I thank you both. We will circle back around. There'll be a way that we say thank you in our own unique way at the Freedom's Chapel Christian Church. But we will continue to share out both of what you do and highlight you and thank you. Anybody else got anything? We want to also thank our other lead organizer, Megan. Megan, what's your name? I don't get Megan Keel. I just had a fried brain. We want to thank Megan for coming on here. Freedom's Chapel is a partner, organizing, founding partner with Micah. And we are thankful for the relationship that we have in both what has been described to us. Anybody else?
One other name. I drove to Memphis from New Orleans yesterday, and I stopped in Jackson, Mississippi to go by Medgar Evers' house where he was murdered in his driveway for registering people to vote. He was a field secretary in Jackson, Mississippi. And I just wanted to call his name because his spirit has been with me as I have done this work. He was murdered June 12th, 1963. His killer was acquitted initially. There was later a federal trial, and his killer was convicted due to the work of his wife, Merle Evers. But I just wanted to call the name of Medgar Evers because he has given me the strength to do the work that I do.
He's hanging close to you.
Yes.
And what I remember in that story is that Maxine was with Medgar Evers dancing the night before he got killed.
Well, I never knew that.
They were together at a party. She used to tell a story about how devastated, of course, she was because they were together celebrating and having fun the day before he was killed. Clem,
you're not Patty unmuted it.
Okay.
Kamala.
Hey,
I want to get in touch with you and give me a number.
Okay.
We're gonna share. I'm gonna share her number with Patty, Clem.
Share it with Patty because I have several things. I'm so happy to see her, but I have several things I want to talk to her about.
Yes, ma'am.
And then Barbara Andrews asked if the check-in accepts donations. I ain't never known a business don't take no donations. And so Keidron, what's your dollar sign? What's your cash app?
It's $ still TNT. I'll drop it in the chat.
All right there. That's right. We help folks.
I appreciate it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I know you do. A businessman needs to have it right. It's called business, ain't it? Yes, it is. Anything else? Megan, you want to tell us anything? You gotta give us any 2 cents? This has made me very happy.
Yes, thank you so much.
This is my birthday present. This is it right here. Y'all have blessed me.
Lunch on me today, Doc.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Lunch on me.
Look at that right there. That young man right there. He knows. He just makes me happy. I saw him and I thought the world gonna be a better place. And then when I saw you with that baby in your arms, I thought, yeah, we got to keep working because that boy need a safer world today than the world we got right now. Ain't that right?
Yeah.
Come on, Megan. What you
got? Yep.
Roz, what I was going to say is if anybody was moved and inspired to do the work in Shelby County in 2021, we are going to be, so Micah, sorry, my dog is going crazy. Micah NAACP, Up the Vote 901, Freedom's Chapel, a bunch of groups have come together for the Shelby County Voter Alliance. And 2021 is a down year in terms of elections, but it's a big year in terms of voter engagement, voter registration, and voter restoration. So we have a year right here without an election to get people's voting rights restored. And if you want to serve on that team and be a leader on that team, member on that team, please let me know. I'll put my number in the chat, because voter restoration is going to be a big effort of the Shelby County Voter Alliance that Micah, NAACP, Up the Vote, and a bunch of our partners. So I'll put my email in the chat, and we're looking for leaders who want to take on this effort to really coordinate all the organizations who are already working on it to be even more powerful.
Thank you, Megan. And the last thing we're going to say is at Freedom's Chapel, or even on Facebook, if you're with us, if you yourself, no shame in the game, if you yourself or you know someone in your family or sphere of influence who needs and wants to have their voting rights restored, you can reach out to us either on our Facebook page, Freedom's Chapel Christian Church. You can find us, you can call us at 901-244-7661. That's the church. Or you can email us at freedomschapelcc@gmail.com. We want to collect and walk alongside of folks to add to the number, so that by 2022, we have, quite honestly, a voting block, because our desire is to follow the lead that Stacey Abrams has done for us.
Yes.
It's showing us what the power is when you actually get votes out to vote. And the last thing is, if you're in the state of Georgia, for real, if you're in the state of Georgia, for real, we need to get them 2 seats. Otherwise, our elected president, our president-elect, is going to face the same thing that happened between 2008 to 2016. We need him not to experience that. I'm probably doing my wrong math, but we got to get, we have to get Mitch McConnell no longer having the foothold he has. Ain't nobody gonna say that. I'm not an attorney. I'm just a preacher. That's our 2 cents. Can you let me? Well, come on. We gonna make sure. I just would like Mitch to retire. That takes us on another conversation. Clementine, You are blessed, and we are blessed, and we're gonna do this work because you and your sister did too much for us to sit on the sidelines. Ain't that right?
Absolutely.
All right, come on, I'm gonna close us with just a word of prayer. Gracious
Yes.
God, on this day, we thank you for all that you have done to us, through us, and for us. We ask that you will pour back into Camilla and Kedron all that they poured out in their transparency and empowering us with knowledge and information. We know that there are those who need their voting rights restored, and now you have given us information and a path to that work. So help us as we help one another, so that together we build a beloved community that you desire and that we desire for ourselves. In all things that are holy for all of us, regardless of how we come to you, we are all your children, and we all seek to be empowered and blessed and to do so for others. This we ask in the name of all that is divine. We pray, amen. All right,
Amen.
now.
Amen.
All right, now. Go in peace, and may the peace be with you. Bye now. I'm gonna follow up with you two. Y'all will hear from me.
Absolutely.
Thank you again.
Bye. Bye-bye now.
Bye.